I'm Angela Kelly Robeck, host of the Empowered Principal Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Dr. Kathleen Corley. Dr. Corley is an amazing leader who has been an educator for more than 40 years. She's opened 3 elementary schools where she has created wonderful places to learn. Our focus is her book, The Magical Place We Call School, Creating a Safe Space for Learning and Happiness in a Challenging World. Oh, so much to learn. You're going to love this episode. Oh, by the way, before you go, it'd be so cool if you helped out the podcast. And here are a couple ways you could do that. 1, you could tell a friend and share links. 2, go to my website and leave a review and subscribe. And 3, how about this? Click on the link on my website homepage where it says, Buy Me a Coffee. By doing this, you could donate $1 or $2 to help me address the costs associated with producing the podcast. What do you think? You're awesome. Enjoy the show.
And the best part of it was when we were putting the kids in the cars at the end of the night. They were talking a mile a minute to their parents, and maybe a parent would say, well, did you thank them? And, oh, no, I forgot. And children would turn to thank me or somebody else and say, this was great. Can we do this next Thursday too? Not a chance, my darling, not a chance. And I'm sorry about that. But that's magic.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Milletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. With Dr. Steve Milletto.
Dr. Kathleen Corley is an award-winning educator and authority on school culture and the charismatic principal at Red Cedar Elementary School in Bluffton, South Carolina. Renowned for her unique communication leadership skills, Dr. Corley has a bachelor's in music education from the University of Illinois, a master's in music administration from Chicago Musical College, Roosevelt University, and a doctorate in educational administration from the University of Illinois. An educator for more than 40 years, she is the founding principal of 3 elementary schools, including Bluffton Elementary and later Red Cedar Elementary, serving as its only principal. She has been an assistant professor at Salem State University and continues to mentor principals. For her musical training and her leadership, Dr. Corley is known as a Pied Piper of education. Our focus today is Kathleen's book, The Magical Place We Call School, Creating a Safe Space for Learning and Happiness in a Challenging World. Kathleen, thanks so much for being on the show, and say hi to everyone.
Hello, I appreciate being here. Thanks so much.
Well, it's great to have you on the show, and you have a 40-plus years, somewhere around 40-plus years in education. I mean, you were the founding principal of 3 elementary schools. What is something that you learned at those schools about starting up an elementary school that you would want to share with a brand new principal?
If I had to choose 10 times out of 10 times, I would choose to open a new school rather than take over one that has already been there, just because it's a clean slate. There's so much enthusiasm generated by the fact that there is a new school. There are people who do want to move. There are people who do not want to move. And it's pretty clear, as long as nobody's being forced to move, but that does happen sometimes in each of the buildings that I've had. If that's the case, that most people want to be there, you can do just about anything because the spirit is there. And you don't have to hear, well, you know, what we've always done is ... So I'm very careful when I go from one to the next. I say, this is something that we could do. And if they're smart, they'll think, yeah, she's already done that before. But rather than saying, well, in this school, we did this, nobody cares. Sorry, but they don't. We just want to know how we can get that synergy together and take the best of all the things that people are saying to do best practice as often as we possibly can, and then learn together.
I love that. That's awesome. One time in my career, this is year 37 for me, and one time in there I was a teacher in a brand new school, and I was invited to interview for it, and that principal got to interview all his staff, and I think the county made him take 2 people. And then everybody else he chose. And that was a cool feeling to be on a staff like that, by the way. So
Sure.
Love that advice. All right, so we're going to focus on your book, The Magical Place We Call School, Creating a Safe Space for Learning and Happiness in a Challenging World. Why'd you write your book?
I believe that especially at this time, there are many, many, many people who, since they've gone to school, think they know all about schools. Just like when I come home from having a root canal, I am pretty sure you could put those dental tools in my hands and I would do a bang up job handling your next root canal. No, I don't think that at all. I think that sometimes people get carried away with what they think schools are, what they think schools ought to be, and then that thing that I said before. Well, when I was a kid, it doesn't matter what you did when you were a kid. No offense in some regards, because if we trained your children or your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren in the same way we were all trained before, they'd be perfectly suited for a world that does not exist anymore. Because we need to teach them to think. We did a whole lot of rote teaching. I'm not dissing anything that happened before. I am a product of that kind of teaching, and kids do need to memorize some things. Yes, we do cursive. Yes, we do the Pledge of Allegiance. I want to get those out of the way too. That's part of the thing, that there are these myths about what we do. You see something on the internet. Do a like if you think that the Pledge of Allegiance should return to schools. Well, I don't know of a school that doesn't do it. Imagine you could find one that is, I don't know, Our Lady of Subversive Practices or something. I don't know. Somebody who wants to throw out everything that has happened before, which is not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting we should learn to walk upright in every profession and grow and figure out what's working and what's not working and be willing to change some things.
I like what you're saying there. I think it's good stuff. We got, one of the things that I also got to ask you is who's your audience? Who you focused on here?
Anyone who cares about education, school board members, teachers, parents. Do they know that they can go down the street to their local school, whether they have children there or not, in a public school, and say, I'd really like a tour of the building? And if they say, well, we don't do that, or you'd have to talk to someone at district office, give them the side eye for just a minute and then say, really? I'm not going to cause any harm. I'm not going to film anything. I wouldn't do anything I shouldn't. And I wish to be escorted because I want somebody to tell me, what is this lab for? And are there still books in the library, even though you might have 35,000 titles in the ether? I have questions. That's all. I'm not looking for trouble. I suppose school people now could say, yeah, I bet you are. because we get thrown at us, metaphorically speaking, kind of on the regular, because they think we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. But when they take the surveys, I'm going to paint with a really broad brush here, and I do not have stats behind me. I'll know better next time to look them up ahead of time. But I feel relatively comfortable saying, when people, all kinds of people, are surveyed about what they believe the state of education is in the United States, they do not give it high marks. But when you ask them about their local school, unless it is so incredibly bad that they must give it low marks, they give their school high marks. So it's disproportionate. Where are those really bad schools? I mean, I can name a couple. Somewhat in the vicinity here, not in our district, but in the vicinity, that when you look at the rankings, they don't generally post them everywhere, but there is, for researchers in our state, there's a ranking of highest to lowest. Number 1 elementary school, and whatever it was, 3,422. And whoever those bottom 10 are, need to have some sort of butt kicking in a way to figure out what they need to do to change, or they need to be taken over by the state, et cetera, et cetera. But there aren't a bunch of bad schools out there. There are a bunch of good schools out there where people are making magic because they care sometimes more about the children they teach than anything else in their lives. I'm not saying they don't have lives. It's just that they prioritize what happens in that classroom and what they present to students. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I think you know that.
Oh, you got that right. That's, it's, oh my gosh, yes. And that's one of the things that, man, I think I could spend all our time on just this topic alone right now with everything you talked about. It's funny as a parent that when my oldest son was going into middle school, I'm a former high school history teacher, former high school assistant principal, former high school principal, and I'm like, this thing called middle school had me a little interested in how you do things. And so I went to the principal and I said, we worked in the same county, and I said, I'd like you to take me on a tour of the school. I said, if you can't, I said, anybody on your staff, I'd just like to do this. And did it during the summer right before school was getting ready to open with pre-planning and stuff like this, and we walked and talked. But it was funny, the look I got at first. I wondered if I went on some list. All right, he's gonna cause me an issue. But
when we get Freedom of Information Act requests on the most ridiculous things, I don't want to say one of them because it would peg the person who does that kind of FOIA request. But what really are you looking for?
Right.
We are good stewards of your money. Our finance department earns award after award. I think it's something like 12 years in a row. Wow. That they've basically, for having your act together, your ducks in a row and all the columns footing. And they're very strict with us about how we spend money and what we spend the money on. And if it looks at all like it's a problem, they're going to say, absolutely not, you can't do that. Like there was something about, it's a trophy place and it was for awards, but they also did something. There was a bar in the back or something. The name of it meant, no, do not do business with these people. They're fine people, but it would look bad on the P-card account listing that you had this. They're like, what? What is it? My office now. Oh no, we were getting awards. Sure you were. in the form of fifths and pints and
nice.
Flat. Yeah.
Nice. That's having experienced working with a board who would check over expenditures and stuff like this, and the world that I was in after, and still am in after being a high school principal, we had to put on different conferences for school systems and stuff like this, and so you did business with these different entities, and in this case, it was a lake resort in an area that's a lake resort, and you never thought that the name of the entity that was the financial entity that you had to write the $5,000 check to sounded like I was gambling or something like this. And I'm like, yeah, no. This, and you had to have a little explanation of what this was. This is the lake. It really is the lake. So I know what you're talking about there. Yeah, it's not good. That's
it's almost like you need to launder money for a good reason for a change.
Right, exactly.
That would look like the cover up, wouldn't it? So
yes, it would.
You'd have to your keys and you wouldn't get to play anymore.
Got that right. All right. So I got to ask you this. So explain your title, because you say the magical place we call school. That's the part I want you to share with us where that came from.
I believe that it is magic. There are some things that come together so incredibly well that you just can't imagine anything else. Divine intervention, I guess I could have called it something to do with divine intervention or magic. But it's really, the magic is the people who work together to make things happen. The teachers who have either a recording device or some sort of other method of recording, something they might think of in the middle of the night that they know would be the best way to teach X according to the standards, because they've been stewing over this for a while, trying to figure out how to make this engaging and exciting. And it's a really dry topic, westward expansion, perhaps. Now, years ago, They made it more exciting by giving us the game Oregon Trail, if you recall. Oregon Trail was a great game, but since computers were so Neanderthal at that time, most of the children spent most of their time hitting the up arrow because that's how you shot at the deer so that you could feed your family. So some of the notions of what westward expansion was about got lost because a kid would pipe up with, "I shot 4 deer today."
Nice.
That's what they'd tell their parents, and we'd get phone calls. But those kinds of teachers who can't wait to come into school to tell people at their grade level, "I think I cracked the code. I think I figured this out." And then they come together and make it even better. Whenever I have what I think is a genius idea and it's fully filled out, I back it up and say I have this little piece of an idea, and I go to say 5 or 6 people and say, "I think you would be good at this part of it, you would be good at this part of it, you would be good at this part of it, you would be good at this part of it." I wrote about one of these, and it was when we did a thing called Just My Imagination. And it came from the Princess Tea at Disney World. I'm not a princess type. I know a lot of folks who are princess types. A lot of little girls are princess types. So they would love to have tea with Snow White or someone else like that. And they dress perfectly. And it costs more to do this thing, of course, at Disney World. First of all, their parents have enough money to get them to Disney World. Secondly, they can do the extras. So they have this grand time. Well, can we have a sort of grand time at school if we made 5 different worlds? Like one is comic book characters, it's heroes and villains, and another one is the Princess Tea thing. We somehow convince them to erect the maintenance workers' scaffolding in our cafeteria, and we covered it with paper, and it became a castle. And the safety person was not aware of any of this, so it was good. And we had no claims that night. We were being very careful. And there was a friend of our music teacher who was getting a degree at SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, and he had just finished a costume making class. So we brought in, it's mostly men's old shirts, bunches of shorts and leggings and stuff like that, but mostly men's old shirts. And he turned those into pirate outfits and hero capes and villain hats and makeup and all that stuff. And then we had one that was space as well, because I remember getting some things for that person to do. And it didn't cost anything. It was sign up the first 120 children. Did anybody get paid to do it? No. Who bought the food? Me. Who made the food? The person who works in the front office and me. Because for one night, they could, it's not so much Disney, but can you leave yourself and can you do another thing? You don't have to join a drama group, but for one night you could do this thing. And the best part of it was when we were putting the kids in the cars at the end of the night, they were talking a mile a minute to their parents, and maybe a parent would say, "Well, did you thank them?" And, "Oh, no, I forgot. And children would turn to thank me or somebody else and say, "This was great. Can we do this next Thursday too?" Not a chance, my darling, not a chance. And I'm sorry about that. But that's magic. And I didn't hog all the creativity because I knew exactly how I thought it should run. I didn't talk about pirates. I didn't talk about princesses. I didn't talk about space. I didn't talk about comic book characters. I went to the people who I thought had a thing. I went to a pirate person on purpose because she's fond of saying "arg." And she's a pirate nut. Nice. So I thought that was the direction she would go. That's what I had envisioned. But I learned long ago when I was in advertising and doing editing, or you write some copy and it gets torn apart. And then you write a dissertation and it gets torn apart. And you write a book and it gets torn apart a couple of times. It's okay. Mine is not the best idea, but let me give you the scaffolding, sorry to reuse that, for what comes next. And they'd lean in my office, go, is it okay if I do heroes? Because I would really like, the kids standing around looking very heroic. Yeah, sure. Should you have some villains with that? Yeah, I don't know who wants to be a villain, but well, I can think of a couple of kids who might. So yeah, let's do that. It was just about even heroes and villains. It was great. You have to be looking toward the next thing and the next opportunity for teachers to do what they love to do, which is create a circumstance where everyone is engaged. Even that child who acts like he could care less about school, he would go home in a minute if you let him. And he can't wait to come to school the next day. Because one of the things we try to do is have something special that every child looks forward to the next day to get them there.
I love that. That is so awesome. It's especially, by the way, when the child asks you, can we do this again? But it's so powerful because it can be such a magical place that, it's that experience of coming to school and wanting to come back to school. And I love that. And I love your title. That's why I had to ask you to share with us why the magical place. Love it. All right. So let's get into your book. In the preface, you talk about the preparation of Brunswick stew. Why was this a big deal? I love this.
Technically, it's red cedar stew, but no red cedars were harmed in the making of the stew.
Nice.
And no matter how long you cook wood, I think it would still be chewy and fiber's good, but I don't think so. It started in Lynchburg, Virginia, where I was first a principal. They made Brunswick stew as it's supposed to be made.
Nice.
Tomato base and corn and okra and lima beans. And that was a nice community-ish event. It was small scale, but it was something they came together to do and people looked forward to it. So when I got to Salem, Massachusetts, we had a new school, the Salt and Stone. And for the first time, the district folks decided that people do like to travel on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So we'd leave half day. And they didn't have half days there. They didn't do that. So this is the first time they're going to do it. And I said, okay, so will lunch be a grab and go sort of situation? Person in the kitchen said, there's no lunch that day. I said, oh, okay. So for the poor kids, they're going to have breakfast with us on Wednesday. They won't have lunch with us on Wednesday. We don't know what, if anything, they'll have on Thursday night or on Wednesday night. The next day is Thanksgiving. You're thinking turkey. I'm thinking maybe not. We had a lot of children from the Dominican Republic there. That was our community. It's called The Point, and it's the immigrants du jour. A big group gets there, French Canadians, then they move out at some point in time. And then Russians, and they move out at some time. The Dominicans stayed, and they made it classically Latina. And there are murals, and there's poetry, and there's dancing, and they're staying. And that's the way it's going to be. But it's a choice school, so we have a mix of all kinds of folks there. If it weren't choice, it'd be probably about 70% Dominican. Anyway, so those folks work 2 jobs, maybe 3, and they're still trying to make ends meet. So I have a problem with this not having food thing at lunchtime. So I said, I just found a recipe for 10 people that, and we had about 450 students. So it's very, it's very bland Caucasian-y. So Perla, who's from the Dominican Republic, helped me spice this up. So we put root vegetables in it, yuca and plantain and boniato and all sorts of things that the rest of us had no idea what they were. But the moms came in, the Dominican moms came in and just like a cartoon with it, peelings flying. And to watch somebody who knows how to dice cilantro is somewhat of an art and not get lots of stalks in it, it's the leaves. So they made this wonderful combination that we turned into a recipe and then did it every year after that. So it became a community event, and it's still going on there. And it's much like in Salem, they very much celebrate Halloween. It's a month-long celebration. It's called Haunted Happenings. And they've pretty much done the same thing with salt and stall stew. And no salt and stalls were harmed in the making of the stew either. So they have an art show, and they have craft making, and they have all kinds of things that bring people together. So we didn't do it at Bluffton L. Don't know why. Guess my brain was on fade then. But at Red Cedar, it made sense again to do it. And with us, it's just about the stew, and it's just about having every child contribute. I love seeing when it's too late and the child's taking books out of his book bag, and there's one stalk of celery that's going, sort of leaning over like it's about to die, and go, Miss Berglund, can I give this to you for the stew? Well, honey, we ate the stew, but we'll use it for something. I'm sure we will. So they love bringing it in. The fifth graders love figuring out each year what the recipe should be. That is, we did the recipe together, and it represents, by the way, all of our different backgrounds, because some of those vegetables are the same, some of them are different, some of the spices are the same, most of them are different than they were at the salt and stall. And I didn't use the salt and stall's recipe. I made it from something else. It was a Mexican recipe in the beginning. Most of our students are from rural Mexico and Central America, and they are asylum seekers, their parents are, for one reason or another. So we come together from all over the place, but we bring something to the pot, as it were, or all 6 of those giant lobster pots that we have cooking outside. So we have a chop day and we have a cooking day. And when you walk through the atrium and smell all of those vegetables being chopped, because they do have a nice aroma together, and then even more so when they're being cooked, we have a couple of chefs who come by to make the roux at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and then cook it all up, and the kids love it. They eat their vegetables that day. So we're heroes with the moms.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. By the way, you're also making me hungry now.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's
DoorDash. Ask for salt and stall, or ask for Red Cedar stew.
There we go.
I'm sure somebody has it.
That's awesome. All right, so let's shift into the first chapter. In the first chapter, you say children are puzzles. This chapter is titled Seeking and Knowing. Could you share what you mean by children are puzzles? Because I like this, where you go into all this stuff, and I know I just pulled that little bit out, but I love this topic right here.
When I was a little kid, my brother had these. They look like men. They're two-dimensional but thick, if that makes sense. They're not three-dimensional because they're not rounded out on the sides, but they have little notches on the shoulders, and the other guy's feet fit perfectly into those notches. So you can stack them one on top of each other, or you can do it's like the Flying Walenga Brothers Circus, where they're holding on to the hands, and their legs are supported by the guy on the bottom, by his thighs. He's standing there, they're pressing in, and he's holding their hands. The point of those guys is that if you think of everybody as paper thin, when the 5-year-old comes into the kindergarten class, we don't know too much about him unless he's the younger sibling of somebody who's already there or has been in our pre-K class. And our pre-K is for the most at-risk students, so it's a good way to go. But we pretty much know this much. It's paper thin. I think of those guys, we only see what's on the face, really, in a metaphor. But there's so much more there. What has that child experienced in his last 5 years. If he's from a middle class or upper family, he probably has 8,000 to 10,000 more words that he's heard, not that he's mastered, but that he's heard that have been out there. The kids who live in trauma, the kids who live in low income, they're not always difficult settings, but low income does bring with it often difficult circumstances. So I know that my dad could be pretty abrupt, and there wasn't a whole lot of conversation except for a direction. Get that for me. There usually wasn't the thank you, but get that for me. If he's angry, there might be some words that happened in front of, get that for me. Or, what are you doing? Why aren't you? Did you finish that? So crank that up a couple of notches, and then you get children who are barked at, kind of, because life is tough. Because, look, I don't have enough money to feed you, and you're asking me, or you're telling me about this drawing you made in class today. I love it, okay? But please go away, because I have other things to do. So the more conversations we can have with children, the more we learn about them. So if there's a thing that happens on the playground that sounds a whole lot like the semi-bullying that older brother does to the child, or that someone who's not being as thoughtful as they might be because they're under stress have touched on a nerve, that's a problem. And it could be the child who's experiencing this just reaches out and slaps that other child. It's not often. They far more frequently, thank God, use their words, and we harp on that. There's always something that you can say. Hey, I don't like it when you do that. Why did you do that? Now, if they get a little bit older, sometimes, especially with boys, they're thinking, I shouldn't push back at this because they'll think I'm some sort of sissy. Like, they'll just look and not even necessarily convey that they don't like a thing. Then it happens again and it happens again because they look like they're an easy mark. And finally, they tell somebody, and then we have this conversation. Well, how many times did this happen? About 9, like every day for the last 5 or 6 days. Why didn't you tell anybody? I don't know. Okay, let's practice how we're going to do this the next time. And then we're going to talk with the guy who did that to you, and we're going to figure it out. If you don't know what's going on in a child's life, and I don't mean that you need to be invasive, but you don't know what might be, I hate to say triggers because it's so overused. Then it's like, oh, everything triggers you. For some people, yes, and I try to avoid those people because I'm bound to trigger them somehow. But for children, they're just figuring out how to deal with whatever comes their way. I have a lot of images about a soccer goalie or a hockey goalie. When the ball comes to you, should you catch it? Should you kick it away? Should you bounce it off your arms? There are lots of choices, but it depends on what's coming at you. And more often than not, when a child is very upset, you need to catch the thing, give him a chance to decompress, and then try to talk with him. And I don't think that I'm always the one who should be doing that, because there are people that he's closer to in the building. And I'll ask that, who's your person you trust? And if the child says nobody, then it's to the counselor, and we need to figure out why. But children are puzzles because you don't know why they do what they do. Sometimes they're just being thoughtless. Sometimes they don't know any better. Sometimes, unfortunately, they're actually programmed to do that because they watched an adult they care about do exactly the same thing. And that's very hard to get past. When you call somebody and say, Jonathan gave his teacher the bird, and then followed it up with the word. Oh no, that's not possible. We don't, and I remember this one distinctly, we don't talk like that in our house. Mom's Facebook page, her profile picture, double words by her. Really?
Wow.
Really? You don't talk that? oh, so this is another life you're not sarcastic, just saying, hey, whatever it is that you have done or you haven't done, let's see if we could change it, because he's bringing it to school believing it's the way you do things in your family. And according to the grandmother, oh yeah, all the music we listen to at home, it's got obscenities in it front to back. And I'm surprised the two aren't saying it yet. Well, they were. We just had to give them a minute. So if you can get at the causes of things, you can start to get to some understanding, and you can start to help the child know that certain things aren't done exactly the same way as in your household. Sometimes that's very, very good, and sometimes that's very bad. But first, we need to treat each other with respect, and that isn't that.
Love it. Thank you so much for talking about that. And you're so right. Even I don't know how an adult couldn't think about themselves and not think of themselves as a young kid and realizing, yeah, we were puzzled then too. So I like that. Mm-hmm. So tell me, one of the things you talk about is that at the beginning, you have a team of school personnel that make home visits at the beginning of the school year. Why do you do that?
That was an old tradition in this district, and it's been in other districts. When children are coming to pre-K, it's good to do a home visit if at all possible. And sometimes, since COVID, it hasn't been as widespread as it was. I mean, obviously during COVID, no, it could not happen at all. And we wouldn't send people out to do that. Although we did have a lot of porch conversations during COVID to help, especially people my age, get their grandchildren's computers to work. They're like, I don't know what's going on. Oh, well, I see here, your grandson is sabotaging his computer. That's why. But after COVID, we haven't done it as much. But when you see children, when you see anybody in, as they say, their natural habitat, it sounds like we're going into a zoo and going, oh, there's the family that just came from Miami. Is that, yeah, that's what it says on the tag, family from Miami. We see them in their natural habitat. What kinds of food are they? No. You know how many toys are there, kind of. You know if there are books around. If there's not a single piece of reading material, you can sort of get a handle on what we might be able to do to support that lack of reading material. Some of our folks from Central America do not read or write in Spanish, nor do they read or write in English. That doesn't mean they're not trying, but some of them just got here. That's the thing I think people forget when it comes to immigrants. Like everybody got on the same boat or same plane or same whatever and got here all at the same time, and they're all in the same place, and we can teach everybody the same things at the same time. Not that it's any different with non-immigrants, but there's that extra language thing. So there are things that some kids don't learn unless we teach them. Manners these days tends to be one of them. Hold the door for the person who's coming behind you. We call it pass the door back. Here's the door. Would you like the door? There, thank you very much. And then you move on. And it's very pleasant. Or saying please and thank you. Making eye contact. I know that sometimes that's a cultural issue depending on what just happened. So that's a tough demand, because that's more of middle class, maybe Midwestern on my part, morals. And it may not play well with everybody, but all of the rest of those common things. And sometimes when I'm talking to people and it seems like we're disagreeing on whatever it was their child did and whatever it was we did as a consequence or in talking with them, I back up and say, when I can't agree with somebody, I'll try to figure out where the Venn diagram intersects. How about we start with, you shouldn't kill people. And they'll do what you're doing, smiling. And, well, of course. Oh, okay, that's our starting point. Now we have a lot of ground to make up. There's a guy who had this issue. I don't think he has it anymore. I think we finally stomped it out. You have no right as a principal to talk to my child about anything other than academics. No. No, that's not true. And the 3 times this happened was when the child was in trouble. He had done something that he shouldn't do. And it's always with a group of guys, and he's a follower. And he's not thinking about the ramifications of what was going on. There was a name that the boys were calling each other, and that name could also be a very nasty name for African Americans. And they were sort of calling across a table in the cafeteria. And a girl, an African American girl, was at the table in between, and it looked like they were saying it to her. And she sort of made a face and shook her head. And then that boy did it again, but he was trying to talk to this other child. And she walked over to him and said, I don't like it when you do that. Could you not do that? And he laughed. Now, this could go 2 ways. It's either I hate you and I don't care about your feelings, and I'm going to keep going on because it doesn't matter to me how you feel. Or I don't think this is a big deal. I don't know why you're getting upset, Karen. Or he's going to stop. What he should have done is stop. He's a 4th grader, should know better. But what happened is 4 or 5 boys just kept doing this, even though this child said, could you just not do that? And a couple of other children, black and white and Hispanic, said, just stop it. Just don't do that. So I talked to the girl first, assistant principal and I talked to the boys. And I said, eventually, I'm not sure why you decided to do that. Well, it's a name we just call each other. And when I say these are good boys, these are children who are answering my questions as I ask them. There's no sarcasm. There's no trying to get out of things, because after a while you can read a lie. I know these boys, and I know if they were trying to lie, it would be an ordeal because they're not good at it. So I said, would it surprise you if I told you that people like my great-grandfather's age, my grandfather's age, so that would be your great and great-great, called people who look like, I'll call her Alasia, that very name? They looked at each other in horror. We didn't know. I said, yeah, but she was trying to get you to know. She doesn't have to give you the history of the United States. When a person says, I really don't like it when you do that, don't you think you could kind of like find another name or do another game, do rock, paper, scissors or something other than what you're doing? And it was kind of a lesson in, when somebody says a thing, maybe you should listen. Now I could see some of your listeners saying, you don't have to alter everything you do because it might make somebody else feel bad. If it's, I'm going to use the trigger word, if it's a trigger for them, that's their problem. Okay, but that would mean that you are some sort of incredible genius who knows every possible permutation of things that would make a person really angry. And Alasia is a cool character. She's not going to do this with every word, but she knew what that word meant for her family, especially going back generations. So when you can work those things out, it's great. Well, the new assistant principal called the dad of one of those children and said, today, we had the boys reflect. We had them write a reflection and apologize to the girl. He says, I have told Dr. Corley before, no one is to talk to my child unless it's about academics. So the AP did what he could do, came back like a 747 had just landed very close to him and went, oh, Mr. Jones, wow. I said, yeah, I thought I kind of warned you. Not enough. No, wow, that was a lot. So I wrote a nice letter to him because I thought he should reflect on this. He should be able to read it and read it and read it. And I said, whereas you expressed your displeasure at that, I never agreed to not do it because that means I can't do my job. And you may as well have some sort of cyborg running the office. Now, maybe that's your preference, but I have to be able to help shape children just as much morally as academically. And believe me, we're not going to step on anybody's toes when it comes to what is common knowledge. Golden rule: treat people like you would like to be treated. And I finished with the boys saying, think of the worst name that somebody could call you. And it's probably a different name for different children. There's a redheaded one there, so I'll bet I know what his was, or some of them. And they're kind of like, yeah, okay, so that name gets passed around, and you say, please don't do that, because it looked like you were looking at her. Well, we weren't, but she didn't know that. And we didn't know the word. It was a recipe for disaster. So the next time something like this happens, maybe you just do that in a locker room where everybody there knows about it. And then we had a little briefing on locker room talk and how women in general would rather not hear it. And your mother would say, any girl who does want to hear that is somebody I'm not going to let you be with.
Nice. One of the things you make me think about is when I've had discussions with people who want to go the direction you just talked about, which is, you can't talk about anything other than, and it's like, yeah, we're too much of a community here for that to not be able to take place, because it's got to be the type of community that interacts well with each other. And this does not allow that to happen if you don't address this. So
exactly.
I like that. All right. So I got to make sure that I mention this, because throughout your book, you share the stories of students. So why'd you do that?
They're illustrative of things that happen in all kinds of schools, all kinds of different places. And if a younger principal or an assistant principal or a teacher reads a story that, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. Next time I'm going to do that. Or, I had one similar, but I think I did it better. I should write to that chick and tell her she's got it all wrong, which is, I would be happy to hear. But those are the things that I remember most from my time throughout all these cities, throughout all these years, that do not seem like it. What is it? 44. It just seems like it can't be. Somebody, Excel has that spreadsheet wrong. It just has to be. But I have all the certificates and the pay stubs, thankfully, to prove that. Started out at $14,200 in my first year, and I was hired 2 weeks into the school year because of a promotion of somebody. And in the third week, they had planned to go out on strike.
Wow.
And my father ran a construction company, cranes and such. And he was a union operator because that's what you did. But he did not run a union shop. He paid union wages, whether they were in the union or not. But when you got to 31 people, you had to be a union shop. And he'd have to, if he wanted to hire somebody, he waited till somebody quit, because he was not going to go over 30. And so there was this management thing. And my part was, I just sat down with a guy and I signed a contract. The ink is not dry on this contract. What possible beef could I have with these people? Right. So I'm a music teacher, and I'm either collecting the children that teachers are dropping off their children at my door, or picking up children at my door. And many of them would drop off the kids, and as the kids are walking by, they go, so you going out with us? And they don't mean for a drink. They mean right. On strike. And I'd go, I'm a first-year teacher. So everybody was going out on strike except for a gnarly, wizened Title I teacher who whispered in my ear, if you don't want to go out, you don't have to go out. I said, is there a danger here? Probably not, because you got me. But I was in 3 different buildings. So I had to cross a picket line coming in, cross a picket line going out, cross a picket line going in, cross a picket line going out, wow. Because it was the middle of the day. So they ended up not going out on strike. But let's see, my home principal said, report to your home school, me, because I'll know, and you just stay here all day because they're probably going out. Okay, so I was there, but that was my day that I was supposed to be in another school. So they get the word, if the strike is settled, he says, you better get to your school. So you'd be there on time to teach music. Okay. So I get there. Nobody there except for the secretary, the principal, and one special ed assistant. But the parents sent the kids. This is a bigger school, about 600. They sent most of the kids. So let's say there were 400 children there. And the secretary and the assistant and the principal and me. What they had done, the people who went out on strike decided to go out for breakfast and spread the day. Because what is management going to do to them, really? So they were gone till about, 11 or so. And I had all the kindergartners through third graders, and the principal had the fourth and fifth graders. I had been teaching for 1 week, and I never had a class quite that large. Thank God for the special ed assistant who was there, because those children were not having it, because this is an upset to their routine, and these were serious special needs students. So we sang a number of songs, and then we took out that great big poster paper and we drew pictures about anything I could think of. Okay, now get a new paper and get a new group of people to do this with, and now we're going to draw what it looks like on the moon. Yes, that's what we're going to draw. It was baptism by fire. And union folks would say, and they're probably right, I deserved it, because every action has a consequence. I just couldn't, in good faith, go out with them after I hadn't been there for very long. And when they picketed one of my schools, they decided that the people at that elementary school were too nice to the people who reported in. So they switched people. They got those middle school teachers. And I still remember the name of the guy who was the meanest in the group. Rick Robertshaw was his name. And he was, before they switched, there was a woman whose entire backyard was chopped up and made into fields for vegetables. And the tomatoes came in. So on the way in, she gave bags of tomatoes to the teachers who were picketing. And I said, Judy, I just fell off the turnip truck, but is that not a weapon when there's a picket line? People are, they wouldn't do that. Okay, but like ammunition, you just handed it to. Anyway, those guys left. The Rick Robertshaw and group came, and what they were holding out for, and those were in the days when you got 9% and 9.5%. So they were trying to do a 9, 9.5, and 10, and the district was offering 9, 9, and 9.5. So, and they were holding out for that, and they called it male maternity leave, but family leave, which lots and lots and lots of districts have now, but this was dark ages. Nobody had it. But they wanted that leave. So Rick is yelling at me, and I just parked my car, and he said, you should be with us. You should be with us. We're working for you too. And I said, you're holding out for a 0.5 percentage point and something I never heard of. If you want my 0.5%, and I reached in my bag and pulled out my checkbook, and I was writing on the top of the hood of the roof of my car, who should I make out the check to? My 0.5% of what I'm getting for this whole year. You're impossible. And yeah, we can agree on that we're both impossible. But I didn't ask him, should we agree that we can't kill people? I did not start with that. It didn't seem like the time or the place, and he might have said the wrong thing in my mind. He might have said that. I don't know.
Could have, yes. Yeah, that's the right thing. Could be pretty good right there. All right, so we're getting close to finishing up, and before I do that, I got to get you to talk about this. In the last, towards the end of your book, you have a chapter it's called "It's What We Do," in a segment titled "Whatever It Takes." You share your thoughts about this and your motto and the school's mantra. Tell us all about this. Tell us about whatever it takes.
Sometimes things are not going to work in our favor. Sometimes we're not going to have the budget we believe that we need to do all the things we ought to do. So we can say, well, we can't do that because we don't have the money. Or we can hustle to find money. And it can be found. We have a very generous anonymous donor. I don't tap him very often. There are certain things that I believe, I don't know for sure, there are certain things I believe he would purchase and certain things I don't think he would purchase. The book vending machine that you might have read about in the book, where students are rewarded for doing acts of kindness. And we talk about them on the intercom, and then they come down the hall and they get applause from everybody they're passing. They get a coin, they put it in the book vending machine, and they get the book, and we take a picture, and it's lovely. And sometimes it's a child who you would not expect to do this thing and doesn't get a whole lot of attention that way. There was one who said, "So this is what it feels like?" And the assistant principal at the time said, "Like what feels like? Like when you do a thing that everybody likes?" Yeah, this is what it feels like. So we can go to him. We have a couple of law firms that will buy our agenda books. That's our planner sort of thing. And they have their logo on the back. They've done the 5K for many years. We try to make it so our 5K doesn't cost anything for our students to be in, and it does cost for the medals and all the rest of that stuff. So you can find people, you can find ways to do the things you don't think you can do. Sometimes people use those things as an excuse. Well, if we just had, we would. Really? Okay, what if I took that away? What if you all of a sudden have it? Well, I don't know. We've never had that before. Do we have now they're going a little bit deeper into maybe thinking through it, or maybe just making excuses why they can't do it. We don't tend to do that. Somebody will have a thing. We absolutely positively have to make certain that these 3 families that I know of that don't have beds, they're sleeping on air mattresses, that somehow they get beds. Where are we going to get beds? Where are we going to get beds? Okay, give me a minute. We'll figure it out. And we get beds, because it's not really easy to do your job at school if you don't sleep very well. And there were 5 children in one family and 3 more in the other, and they're cousins. And grandma's taking care of all of them, grandma and great grandma, on their retirement, on whatever it is, on Social Security, whatever it is they have. So we make sure they have food. We make sure they have uniforms. Uniforms are easy because we just buy them in bulk, and kids grow out of them, and you get them more. You give them more. Churches give us underwear. Weird thing, but clean, new, brand new underwear, and socks. And there's the shoe places do Happi Feet. We go see them on a particular Saturday in December, and certain kids who are pegged for this event get new shoes, and they're very happy. Whatever it takes means all of it. And if we have to network with somebody else to make something happen, you'd be surprised at how many people are just waiting to be asked a thing. If you tell them about somebody who needs something, they might have been wishing for some time that they could be the people who help somebody just like that. And they don't know each other. And maybe they're never going to know each other. But these folks who want to help will be able to do that. And it's a win-win. And it also builds some kind of trust, because some of those same people who have trouble trusting us are the same people who need the most. And that's why they don't tell us they don't have beds, or they don't tell us that their phone got disconnected again.
You know, it's one of the things that I think just the idea of having the ability to, we got to figure this out. And, you know, it's as opposed to whatever barrier that's been placed in front, you know, trying to figure it out. And I think that's so important. You know, Kathleen, this has been awesome. Where can our listeners find, you know, additional information, connect and learn more? Where do you want to send them?
There's an oddly titled website called the magical place we call school.com, and that's a good place. And there's a blog there. I haven't really gotten it started very much, but I need people to have questions and answers and take issue with me on things and just want to have a conversation. I'd be remiss if I did not tell you, I believe that there are many magical schools out there. We've talked about the school where I'm the principal with fantastic people, and I've met so many wonderful teachers in all kinds of places. Your listeners should be saying, well, we do that, and we do that, and we do that, and we could do that. So this isn't so magic. No, you don't know what magic you have and how you can help younger teachers understand this is what it's all about. This is why you went to school. You didn't go to school to thoroughly read the standards and memorize them. You need to use them, and you need to plan your lessons based on the curriculum and the standards, but make it as exciting as you possibly can. Make it so that you, as a small child, would want to be sitting there, and that you, as a small child, couldn't wait to go home to tell your parents about it. That's what school should be like. It takes tons of energy and tons of heart, but it's a calling. So if it's yours, stay with it.
Love it. That is awesome. I got one last question for you, Kathleen, and it goes like this. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? And what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
It would be, I think he knows it, but it would be my music teacher, course director, assistant band director, Robert Ash at Thornton Fractional Township High School South in Lansing, Illinois. He was pretty inspiring. One thing I didn't like was that he did that thing that we talked about. Well, when I was at my last school, and there was one day that I told him in a sort of private moment, you know, we've heard about your other school. I think I could walk into the building without help, find the music room, look through the files, and find all the music you did 2 years before you left and the year before. Could you just talk about us? But he was, when he came, that was my sophomore year. And that was the first year I was in that group. Well, he's just building the group, and there are hardly any guys in it. That's usually the way it goes if a program dwindles. But he was building it, and he built it into something fantastic. It was kind of a whatever it takes sort of deal. He was also my voice teacher because I majored in voice when I went to the University of Illinois. So it would be Robert Ash.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kathleen, thank you. This has been awesome talking with you and sharing your book, The Magical Place We Call School, creating a safe space for learning and happiness in a challenging world. Kudos on the awesome career focus, and what a powerful book with incredible reflections on lessons learned. Wishing the best in all you do.
I appreciate it. Back at you.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.